What's up, everybody? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're just going to talk about some teams that I find interesting in the early part of the NBA season. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials in the description as well. And let's go ahead and get started. By the way, if you guys like this format of me just talking about a couple of things rather than one big topic in a video, let me know. I'm totally down to just do some quick little news segments every single day. With that said, let's talk about some teams in the Eastern Conference that have just been, whether it be a little bit surprising, a little bit better than a lot of people thought that they would be, or just interesting. There's three teams that come to mind for me, and all of them are in the Eastern Conference, and they all support this idea that I had coming into the season, that the East was not only better at the top from a championship title contending aspect than it had been in a while, but also from a depth standpoint. There's really only two teams, in my opinion, in the conference coming into the season that couldn't really convince themselves that they would be a playoff team, and that was Detroit and Orlando. The rest of the conference has an argument, and still has an argument through the first couple of games of the season, to be potential playoff teams. But there's three teams I want to talk about specifically in terms of what's going right for them at the beginning of the year. The first is the Washington Wizards. They are... I didn't really know what to think of them coming into this year because I could see the formula. I could see just having a lot of good basketball players around Bradley Beal, around Spencer Dinwiddie, a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things. And that's just not something Washington has had really in the Beal Wall era. They were always very, very top-heavy teams. They didn't have a ton of depth. They were always sending out their first-round pick in the middle of the season to get another good role player. But this team came in the year with a handful of really, really good NBA players, and a lot of that has to do with the Russell Westbrook trade and turning that big contract into a couple of pretty critical role players for them. I mean, of course, it all starts with Beal, and then you've got Dinwiddie, but Bertans, KCP, Kuzma, Harrell, Thomas Bryant when he comes back, Hachimura, Denny, Aaron Holiday, Kispert, the guy that they just drafted, Raul Neto, Daniel Gafford, who you guys know that I love. There's just a lot of good basketball players, and in the regular season, that's a pretty good formula to rack up a lot of wins. And the big thing for Washington now is they can survive an off Bradley Beal night. There have been games to begin this season where they have not played, or he has not played particularly well, but they've still managed to play well enough to win. And again, in the regular season specifically, this kind of formula of having 10, 11, 12 guys that you feel confident can go out there and perform is a good formula for potentially, having a better record than a lot of people thought. And I just kind of wanted to highlight that Wizards team and the kind of the way they started the season. I like how Dinwiddie complements Beal. It's just a fun team on a night-to-night basis. Next, let's talk about the New York Knicks. This is a team that I was lower on than a lot of people were coming into the season. And the reasons for that were I didn't know if the defense was sustainable. Thought that maybe last year was just kind of a flash in the pan type thing in terms of them being legitimately one of the best defensive teams in the entire league. And even though they improved their playmaking at the guard spots and stuff, it's not like they added an all-star caliber, playmaker to this roster. Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker at this point in his career are nice players, but they're not the most durable in terms of Kemba, and it's not like they're huge ceiling-raising guys in terms of Evan Fournier. But what has ended up happening for New York is they're playing playoff caliber defense to begin the season already. These guys are switching up their ball screen coverages. They have a lot of different versatile options they can go with, where they can go with Toppin at the 5 if they want to. They can run him and Mitchell Robinson together. Mitchell Robinson being back is huge for this team defensively. They just have a lot of different options. They have a lot of length, a lot of size. And even though they're not putting up eye-popping numbers, just having Kemba and having Fournier being able to run offense for them specifically late in games is huge. And having that shot creation ability when it's not Derrick Rose and it's not Alec Burks is huge. Granted, their end-of-game stuff is still largely centered around let's get Julius Randle the ball and hope for the best. And against the Bulls most specifically recently, that formula almost cost them the game the last 3 minutes of the game, where Randle is he's just not an elite shot creator guy like that. There's a lot of long twos, a lot of fall away jumpers, a lot of stuff that's not super, super efficient. But within the flow of the game, they get stops. They turn that into offense. They've got better playmakers now. RJ looks like he's continued to improve. And overall, I'm starting to believe more and more in this Knicks team than I thought I would have come into the season. I'm not saying they're going to be a top 4 team or anything, but again, it speaks to this idea of the Eastern Conference being better than maybe a lot of people thought that it would be. And then the last team that is going to get a lot of love here, we're going to talk about for a little while, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, it's not like they have an incredible record. It's only a handful of games. But relative to what we've come to expect out of Cleveland the last couple of seasons, the way they've started this season is certainly a positive one. And they've done a significant amount of roster shakeup here, especially for a team that, still has a lot of the guys we've become accustomed to. Colin Sexton is still here. Kevin Love is still here. Guys they've recently drafted, Isaac Okoro, Darius Garland. But there's a lot of additions too. Ricky Rubio, Evan Mobley, who we're going to talk about here for a little bit. Jared Allen, who they brought in last year, is just kind of being randomly a part of the James Harden trade. Lauri Markkanen, who I almost completely forgot about. And again, it's similar to, there is kind of a theme that runs through all this, and that is just having a handful of good NBA players. A lot of times what holds back these younger teams, what has held back the Knicks, Wizards, and Cavs in the past is not necessarily their top 3 or 4 guys, although they're not as talented as some of the better teams in the league, but it's once you get to your 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that have to play during the regular season on a consistent basis, if your team completely craters and can't create offense and can't defend, it's a huge issue. But again, when you look at having Ricky Rubio on the roster has been a nice addition for the Cleveland Cavaliers. But really, I want to talk about Evan Mobley here. So Mobley is a guy that was a bit of an enigma for me before the draft, just because I guess I personally am always a little bit more hesitant to, really be all over, a guy that's going to play the 4 or the 5, whatever the case may be, before the draft, because 1, it's quite frankly just not as exciting, but 2, I feel like that's most often where people miss. Mo Bamba is a guy that comes to mind. When you're looking at the high upside big guy, that's where I feel like a lot of the draft misses come from. And I'm not saying that I thought Evan Mobley was going to be a bust. I was a little bit indifferent on what he was going to be as an NBA player. But to begin this season, granted, it's only a handful of games. It's his rookie year. It's the Cavs. It's not like teams are coming out there and giving the Cavs their best shot. But from a fluidity standpoint, from a defensive positioning standpoint, from a defensive upside standpoint, Evan Mobley has been fantastic, and he unlocks so many different things for Cleveland. And when you just kind of project this team into the future, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley together in the front court, if they continue to grow and develop and figure out a way to play together, be on the floor at the same time, has the potential to be the best defensive front court in the league. I'm going to say that again. I think Evan Mobley and Jared Allen together have the potential to be the best defensive front court in the league in a couple of years. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a guy that I love coming in the draft, and I still really, really like him. And I think that offensively, he's more advanced in terms of his ability to space the floor and things like that. But Mobley around the rim is better. He's a more complete player. And defensively, the upside that I saw with Jaren Jackson as a modern-day Chris Bosh is some of the same things that I'm seeing with Evan Mobley, but maybe even on a higher level because of the fluidity, because of the defensive understanding of where to be on the floor. And that is the side of the floor that excites me about Cleveland. Maybe they won't make the playoffs. Maybe they won't make the play-in game. But strictly as a building block, as a piece of an identity of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, give us this. They give us the potential to be a top 10 defensive team every single year moving forward if they continue to grow and develop. And we can figure out the offensive stuff. It's a little bit easier to find an above-average perimeter player. Look at what the Knicks did for agency. It was relatively easy for them to bring in Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. Those guys are above-average perimeter creators and playmakers. It's much more difficult to do that for game-changing, versatile 4-5 front court guys. So even if the Sexton thing doesn't work out and they can't figure out a contract extension and they have to move him or whatever the case may be, or Garland doesn't become the guy that a lot of people hope that he will be, and Isaac Okoro doesn't become the great wing defender that people want him to be, even if none of those things happen in a positive way for Cleveland, they can find guys that will be able to score for them, whether it be in the draft, whether it be in free agency, whether it be a trade, because they've got the other stuff figured out. Like Mobley and Allen together, just lock it in for the next couple of years as one of the more interesting, young, versatile defensive front courts in the league. In terms of this team for this season, Kevin Love is still interesting out there, could potentially raise his value, looks relatively locked in. The Markkanen addition has been a bit clunky at times, but I think that specifically with the way that Mobley and Allen, work together, him being able to play the 3 isn't a complete disaster as long as he can space the floor. And worst case, he can be a guy that comes off the bench, and maybe him and Kevin Love, can be a nice bench front court option as well. And then it's still wait and see mode on the whole Garland, Sexton, Okoro combo. But the bottom line is for Cleveland, they're better than people thought that they would be. There's a significant amount of upside moving forward, and Evan Mobley is more than likely the real deal and a significant game changer when it comes to the defensive side of the floor for Cleveland, which if you're talking about trying to get a building block out of the draft, that's one of the more unique and more important building blocks you could possibly hope to get, is a guy that is on like the Anthony Davis level of defensive ability already in the beginning of his rookie season. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that as well as these other teams that I mentioned. But like I said, I just kind of wanted to dump some of my thoughts here about some of these teams as we have only gotten through the first couple of games of the season. But that's going to be the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials in the description as well. And yeah, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.